Well, here we are again, week 8, and we nearly have our semi-finalists. We've come a long way to arrive at our final 5. We started with 48 finalists, not to mention the plethora of hopefuls who lined up for the blind auditions only to be turned away at the starting gate. Now, last episode I promised a more technical review this week after my very direct appraisal of the whole fraudulent debacle that is TV talent shows last week. Will I resist the temptation of another rant? Let's find out together, shall we? Hello, my name is Dr. Dan and I'm a contemporary singing voice specialist, and this is my weekly video review of The Voice Australia. Now, you won't be surprised to hear me say that I've been generally underwhelmed by this year's lineup. For the most part, we've been witness to the national presentation of amateur singers being paraded as professionals. The Emperor's New Clothes springs to mind as an appropriate allegory. There's definitely something missing from this year's show, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Help me out and leave a comment below outlining your thoughts on how this year's competition rates against previous years. Well, certainly the ratings are up on last year, and the 2016 auditions have already been announced for Season 5, but I just can't see the quality of voice getting any better. Regardless, we press on with our review of Season 4. It's time to get technical. It was a bit of a smorgasbord on how not to sing this week, remembering that there are always two things at play in a vocal performance: function and aesthetic. Aesthetic is the part of the song that we as an audience use to determine whether or not we personally enjoyed the performance, and our tastes in songs differ. Our tastes in aesthetics are quite often very different from one another, but good aesthetic doesn't always equal good function. The function is the manner by which the performer produces their sound. Function takes into account the overall physicality and sustainability of the sound. And TV talent shows celebrate aesthetic and typically ignore function. Why? Well, function isn't sexy. The viewing public don't care that Caleb's song choice this week required a dexterous mechanism capable of moving freely between his registers. Truth be told, I think Caleb's song this week, I Believe in a Thing Called Love, was by far the most difficult piece we've heard this season. Now, before we continue, let's have a quick listen to that performance. Caleb didn't absolutely nail the piece live, but there probably aren't many singers who could. I know I'd personally find that piece a mouthful. A song that is nowhere near as difficult is the REM hit Everybody Hurts. Let's have a listen to Joe Moore's attempt. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't mind poor intonation if the performer connects with their audience and communicates the piece. Sadly, Joe Moore achieves neither in this rendition. His pitch is poor and his performance has no depth. But it's not his performance per se that I want to review, it's his technique, or the lack thereof, that I want us to examine. Have you noticed that Joe has an interesting little performance mannerism? Every time his voice needs to enter his upper register, the higher notes of the song, his head lilts to the side towards his left shoulder. Actually, this is not only a distracting idiosyncrasy, it's also an unhealthy vocal habit that, if left unchecked, could cause Joe some significant vocal health issues down the track. I often remind my students that the voice requires support, and it will find that support intuitively all by itself if left to its own devices. The only problem is, the natural intuition of many voices is not necessarily the most efficient mechanistic setup. In the case of Joe, his voice knows that it needs extra muscular support for his higher notes, so it goes about applying that support from the neck up. Now, normally this would lead to just general constriction for the singer, but for Joe, the potential consequences are much more dire. You see, Joe's muscular application has a lack of symmetry. That is, the extrinsic muscles of his neck and larynx are not activating equally. The result is his head gets pulled down to one side, down to his left shoulder. And the long-term implications of this for Joe is that the voice internally starts to mimic its external asymmetry. Essentially, Joe runs the risk of his larynx becoming muscularly lopsided, with one vocal fold needing to work harder than the other. I won't bore you with the possible pathological consequences of asymmetric vocal folds, but suffice to say, it ain't good, especially for a singer. Well, hopefully that wasn't too technical. The reality is, many of these singers simply don't have what it takes to sustain a long-term vocal career because their voices have not been prepared ahead of time, ready for the journey. Talking of journeys, I still have 4 of my top 12 in play. Now, this being said, after Sunday night, my remaining 4 is likely to become 2 at best. It seems crazy to me that the 2 best voices left in the competition, Naomi and Caleb, have been put up for elimination. But there you have it. If you're a pro-level vocal and you enter a TV talent show, you almost certainly will find yourself pitted against an amateur-level voice and the cunning manoeuvres of the show's producers. This aside, who's left standing on your list of top 12 picks? Again, leave your comments below. Last week I predicted that Nathan was being positioned to win this year's show. Now, given that he's up for elimination this week, I need to concede that perhaps my prediction was offered in haste. If he's still standing after Sunday night, then I think there will be little doubt. I must add, however, that if Nathan does bow out on Sunday, then I think it will likely be his teammate Joe Moore who will go on to win. Now, for my pick of the week. For the first time in the 5th chair history, I don't have one. Given that we've arrived at week 8, I expected more. I really thought each of the performances were rather flat and uneventful. Even my 2 faves, Naomi and Caleb, didn't move me to the point of connection. So instead, I'm going to direct you to a short interview with one of Australia's most talented exports, Tim Minchin. This interview was shown on Monday night at the end of the ABC's 7:30 report, and in it he discusses his thoughts on TV talent shows and the damage they do to the developing artist's psyche. His thoughts are mature, considered, and very insightful. This 7 minutes are a must-watch, so please watch it. Well, that's all for me this week. Until I see you again post-semi-final fallout, when I can hopefully reinstate the Pick of the Week Performance Award, I hope, I'm Dr. Dan. Sing well.